So I've been working in a tech startup for over 6 months now, and it's been a real shock to the system. I come from more of a corporate background. It's been vastly different to what I could have ever predicted it would be like. And along the journey, I've learned so many different things, and it would just take me so long to go through everything. But I put together 6 lessons for 6 months that I believe have been probably the most important that I've ever learned in my career. If you're considering working in a startup, I really do think that these lessons will be impactful for you and will ensure that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. And with that said, let's get into the video. So number one is don't do any extracurricular work. What I mean by this is when you are working on a task, that usually means that no one else is working on all the other items that need to be done. And the reason for this is because you just don't have enough resources. You don't have enough people to be working on everything all at once. So you cannot afford to work on anything that is not the number one priority right now. Even if you believe that what you're doing is important, if it doesn't align with the current goals of the wider team or company, it can cause internal conflict, or worse, it can impact the performance of your team. Number two, if it's not shipped, it's nothing. As developers, it's easy to feel like we've done a lot of work when we write many lines of code. But it's important to remember, you can write thousands of lines of code. You can deploy it to the dev environment. You can deploy it to staging. But if it's not in production and if it's not visible to customers and to investors, then it might as well have been like you've done no work at all. Your customers and investors don't care about lines of code. They only care about features that they can see in front of them. Number three is your health is a performance metric. In a startup, it's easy to find yourself working 10, 12, 14-hour days. But if you take time away from your health will always ask for it back later on. I don't care how strong you think you are, grinding that many hours a day without any sleep and exercise will impact your team. Guaranteed. It's better to be a reliable 9 to 5 worker than someone that is inconsistent. Someone that's the last to leave one day and then the next day is a liability. Number four, meetings are important. The standard software developer advice is reduce your meetings, allow developers to work. But what I've noticed in practice is that this makes it so much easier to fall out of sync with your team. And not only that, it doesn't allow your assumptions about a task to be challenged by your peers. I find that just sitting with the team and talking about a feature and how we're going to implement it better helps us identify everything that we might need. More often than not, you actually save time in the long run, and it also reduces friction because your team are more in sync with what you're doing. Number five, be absolutely clear about what done means. When you are working on a task, it's easier than you think to have differing opinions about what done actually means. Maybe you think it means completing X, Y, Z, but your investors and colleagues only wanted X and Y, or vice versa. Being as explicit as possible is paramount. Don't ever assume that anyone understands what you are saying, and also don't ever assume that you understand what other people are saying. Make sure all communication can be understood by a 5-year-old. If you do this, you will save yourself an untold amount of time. Number six, you're only as good as your last performance. When you're working in a startup, it's like being in sports. It's like being a boxer, for example. People have short-term memory. How you performed in the last few months is not relevant to how you performed today. Don't overwork yourself in the hopes that you can relax later on. That would be like if a boxer emptied the gas tank in round one only to spend the rest of the fight on the back foot. It's better to pace yourself and remain consistent. And it's worth remembering that in a corporate environment, you might be reviewed on a biannual basis, on a quarterly basis, maybe a monthly basis. But in a startup, You're reviewed almost daily. And don't ever take it personally when people don't remember what you've done. The main thing is if they can trust you. And that's the only thing you should care about. Trust comes first. And that's the most important thing, especially when working in a startup. So these have been my 6 lessons for working in a technology startup. Now, these lessons don't always apply. There might be days where you need to work longer. There might be days where you can't make that meeting. But the main thing is find what works best for your team. And the way you do that is communication above all. Over communicate. Don't be worried about pestering the people around you. It's much better to talk more than to think you're doing everything right. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing because it really does encourage me to make more videos like this. But regardless, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.